Welcome to RedPill Torah, calling believers from man's institutions to God's instructions. Some people say that all's fair in love, war, and business. I'm Tim.
And I'm Miss. Those people need to listen to today's podcast and learn business management Jehovah's way. Let's talk about it.
If you didn't know, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. Understanding and believing the Torah gives context to the rest of the Bible. The Bible is all about Yeshua, the Messiah.
Amen.
You can email us at redpilltorah@gmail.com. Find us at our website, www.redpilltorah.com. Follow us on redpilltorah.podbean.com, on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, or wherever you hear your favorite podcasts. We love to hear from you.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And a big shalom to our listeners in Tennessee and Thailand. Listen out for RedPill Torah on a radio station near you. RedPill Torah is an outreach of B'nai Ephraim Messianic Ministries and Assembly.
Miss, I was thinking about one of the many lessons I learned from the world of work. My first summer job as a kid was a real experience. I worked as a cleaner in a movie theater. Now, each of us on the cleaning team had one theater to clean, and there was an older manager who would take a lawn blower and blow the garbage from the back of the theater, under the seats, to the front. Now, almost all of the trash made it to the front. The rest would get stuck in those sticky spots of spilled soft drinks on the floor.
Wow, that sounds like some job. How long did you last at that?
Well, it was a fast-paced environment. On the first day, the older gentleman explained that I could move up fast, so I was really eager. And he told me to hold out my hand, so I did. Then he put a putty knife in my hand and said, "Scrape up all the gum you see on the floor. Now get to work." It took me about 2 weeks to find another summer job.
That's pretty funny, Dad. You really were on the fast track.
Mm-hmm.
As I recall, your second job was considerably better. What exactly did you learn from the first summer job?
Well, besides the proper technique for gum scraping, I learned that the road to being the boss might be a little longer than I thought. Now, I was sure I would get there, and when I did, I was determined to do a better job than that cleaning manager at the theater.
And you did what you aspired to do. You rose to the highest levels of business management, and Jehovah has been very faithful to you, from the gum scraping department to the corner office. I've met a lot of ambitious young people who expect to be boss right away, or at least in a short time. To them, it usually seems better to be the one giving directions instead of the one scraping gum, as you would say. These days, many people experience a style of leadership that is abusive, disrespectful, or just hard to deal with. Some employers use people's desire for money as leverage. They don't treat people the way the nation of Israel was commanded to treat people.
Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 28 puts it into perspective. It says, "Then Zabdi's sons came to Yeshua with their mother. She bowed down, begging a favor from him. He said to her, 'What do you want?' She replied, 'Promise that when you become king, these 2 sons of mine may sit, one on your right and the other on your left.' But Yeshua answered, 'You people don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I'm about to drink?' They said to him, 'We can.' He said to them, 'Yes, you will drink my cup, but to sit on my right and on my left is not mine to give. It is for those for whom my Father has prepared it.'"
Reading from verse 24, it says, "Now when the other 10 heard about this, they were outraged at the 2 brothers. But Yeshua called them and said, 'You know that among the Goyim, or the Gentiles, those who are supposed to rule them become tyrants, and their superiors become dictators. Among you it must not be like that. On the contrary, whoever among you wants to be a leader must become your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many."
If you've been listening to RedPill Torah for a while, you know who you are in relation to Israel. You may be born into a family that descends from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Many more of you have that connection than you may know, but Elohim knows each one of us. Most importantly, we hope that you are part of Israel through faith in the Messiah of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Romans chapter 9, verses 6 through 8 tells us that they are not all Israel, who are of Israel, neither because they are descendants of Abraham, but in Isaac, the seed of promise. That's where we find the true Israel.
Amen.
It has always been about faith. So, if you are part of Israel, you should be treating people according to the Torah, God's instructions. Mama, let's see what the Torah says about how we should treat others.
Okay, Daddy. Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40, tells us about when Yeshua identified the greatest commandments. The first is to love Jehovah our Elohim with all we have, and the second is to love our neighbor as ourselves. From the Torah, we learn specifics regarding how we should love Jehovah's way. Fortunately, we don't have to make up something. We just need to follow his instructions. Leviticus, the book that details how to live a holy life, teaches us how to treat one another. It is the book Yeshua quoted from when he said we are to love our neighbor as ourselves.
Our Elohim knows that when it comes to money and business, our nature is to establish control as much as we can for our own protection. Leviticus 25 tells us about Israeli citizens' right to redeem the land that they had sold. The value of the land is to be calculated based on the number of years after the previous Jubilee year, when the land was supposed to be returned to the original possessor. Now, after describing the details of the transaction, Yehovah said, starting at verse 17, "You are not to take advantage of each other, but you are to fear your Elohim, for I am Yehovah your Elohim. Rather, you are to keep my regulations and rulings and act accordingly. If you do, you will live securely in the land."
Later in Leviticus 25, we read Elohim's instructions for dealing with a brother who has fallen on hard times. Reading from verse 35, it says, "If a member of your people become poor, so that he can't support himself among you, you are to assist him as you would a foreigner or a temporary resident, so that he can continue living with you. Do not charge him interest or otherwise profit from him, but fear your Elohim, so that your brother can continue living with you. Do not take interest when you loan him money, or make a profit when you sell him food." Tim, selling or lending to this brother in distress is not a problem. Jehovah specifically forbade charging interest or making a profit with that type of transaction.
By today's standards, it seems okay to make a few dollars any way you can, honest or otherwise. Our Elohim said in Malachi 3, verse 6, that he does not change. That means that if today's standards don't agree with Leviticus 25, the people of Elohim should still be following Elohim's standards. Now, chapter 25 goes on to describe how to handle a brother who is working for you to pay off his debt. This extends to our modern-day idea of the employer-employee relationship. Reading from verse 39, "If a member of your people has become poor among you and sells himself to you, do not make him do the work of a slave. Rather, you are to treat him like an employee or a tenant. He will work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then he will leave you, he and his children with him, and return to his own family and regain possession of his ancestral land. For they are my slaves, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, they are not to be sold as slaves. Do not treat him harshly, but fear your Elohim."
Several times in the instructions about treating people properly, we read that we should fear Jehovah our Elohim. That is a not-so-subtle reminder that Jehovah owns everything and everyone. We are to recognize his ownership over all things and act in the way he directs us. If we forget that everything and everyone belongs to him, he always has the right to repossess whatever it is we think we own. Our Elohim feels strongly about us loving our neighbor as ourselves and treating them with respect. Jehovah even has standards on how we are to treat people who are not a part of the Commonwealth of Israel.
That's right, Mama. We find some of those standards in Leviticus 19. Reading from verse 33, "If a foreigner stays with you in your land, do not do him wrong. Rather, treat the foreigner staying with you like the native born among you. You are to love him as yourself, for you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. I am Yehovah your Elohim. Don't be dishonest when measuring length, weight, or capacity. Rather, use an honest balance scale, honest weights, an honest bushel dry measure, and an honest liquid measure. I am Yehovah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Observe all my regulations and rulings, and do them. I am Yehovah.
So, what would you do if you discover that the way you live your life and some of your beliefs are out of line with God's instructions? Would you take the blue pill and take advantage of an immigrant who doesn't understand the local currency?
Or would you take the red pill and treat that person as you want to be treated and deal fairly in business? Only you can answer that question. The book we know as James, chapter 5, tells about Elohim's impending judgment on wealthy people who don't follow his instructions. Reading from verse 4, it says, "Listen, the wages you have fraudulently withheld from the workers who mowed your fields are calling out against you, and the outcries of those who harvested have reached the ears of Yehovah Tsevaot. You have led a life of luxury and self-indulgence here on earth. In a time of slaughter, you have gone on eating to your heart's content. You have condemned, you have murdered the innocent. They have not withstood you."
Just like Elohim told Cain that his murdered brother Abel's blood was crying out to him, Yehovah hears the cries of withheld wages. Do you really think you can get away with defrauding someone who is in covenant with the Most High? As citizens of Israel, our constitution is the Torah, God's instructions. These are laws that govern how we do business and how we treat each other. We are under that law, and we have grace to get back on track if we fall short of the law's requirements. And for that, we should be very grateful.
Amen.
Well, Daddy, that's all we have time for today. If you are in business or management, reread and meditate on the scriptures we've shared. Send this episode to a believer who has employees. Let's encourage one another in Jehovah's Word. Thanks for listening to RedPill Torah, where
you can handle the truth.